Hi everybody, Colin Anderson here once again. The shot I'm going to go through today is Fly Girl. So what I might actually do is break this down into two sections just to keep the tutorial a little bit shorter. So I think the first thing we'll look at today is how you establish the overall feel and the background. Alright, so if I just switch off this front layer here or the overall shot and just concentrate on the background, and I'll show you how to get this type of depth to help sell the shot. Alright, so the first thing we do is go down to the very first layer, which is just a basic desert plate. What I did here is I duplicated the layer of the desert and I darkened it. All right, nothing special, just duplicate, and I said to multiply up here, you'll see, which automatically darkens it. And also just to increase the grunginess of the background, I went up into levels and just further darkened it. Command L, nothing too drastic, just a little bit pulling on the left histogram there and just darkening it over like that. Okay, on top of that, I put a actual runway on. The runway is, if I turn it back to the normal mode, you'll see is right here. Yeah, so I think when I took this shot, we were actually taxiing on the plane, getting ready to take off. You can actually see the wing of the airplane right here. All right, which isn't really going to be a problem later on because the other elements are going to cover that wing, so I'm not going to worry about cloning it away. All right, so to get the background texture to show through, I'm going to set this to overlay. Now, saying to overlay, I'm getting now the background is now showing up, which gives a nice gritty texture to it, like it's actually a combat field. All right. Um, Top of that, I've just put a levels adjustment, simple like that. Uh, that's all I've basically done. You can see I've just lightened it a bit, like that, just because I'm trying to get the detail to show through a bit better. You'll notice I've got this little icon here clicked. By clicking that, that is just affecting the layer of the tarmac. It's not affecting the other layers below it directly. It's just basically hitting that layer there. So I'm just affecting that layer. All right. Next layer is the cloud. All right. Just your basic sunset cloud. I've masked the bottom of it here right around the horizon. You can see. If I take the mask off, you can see the actual. It was actually shot on sunset, I believe, and you can see there's boats and surfers and waves and all that stuff in there, which obviously I don't want. So I've just masked that off. Masking it off, I've basically two ways to do this. You can actually do a marquee like that, and you can feather it, something like that. I'd probably give it a 15 pixel radius, something like that. Yep. And I would just well, look, let me do it for you properly. So let me just move that mask there. Okay, so to do that, I would get the mask icon down here. I'd click on that, and my mask is now loaded. If you don't use mask, it's something you really should get your head around. It's essential for this type of work, and it saves you having to destroy your picture by rubbing it away. Once you rub something away using a razor tool, it is gone forever. With the masking tool, we can keep adding and subtracting from the mask as much as we want without destroying the actual file. Okay, so there's my mask. I'm going to pixel it, pixels. I'm going to give it a feather radius of, let's say, 25. Let's see how that goes. All right. With my black selected on here first, you can see the black's up first. What black does is erase the layer away. White brings it back. So now if I hit Option Delete, I'm filling the layer with black, which is giving it a mask. And you'll notice here by feathering it quite hard, we're getting a nice graduation on here, which works like a bit of fog in the distance, which is nice. Now, if you look at that and go, I wouldn't mind a little bit more fog, or I would like the mask to be a bit more transparent so I can see a little bit more of the background, or it's a bit the mask is a little bit too hard edged. Instead of drawing a marquee and doing another, like this, and then saying doing another 25 pixels and feathering it, what you can actually do is click on the layer, go up to Filter, Blur, Gouache and Blur, and you can actually just blur that filter out like this, and you can actually eyeball it to see how much you're getting. See, the more I increase it at 40 pixels, you'll see I'm getting a bit more of the horizon, and it almost like brings the brings the fog more down into the foreground, which is kind of interesting. This way you can really tweak it to exactly what you want. All right, so, and I'm looking at here, I'm thinking maybe 48.7 looks pretty good. Go okay, and that's it. That easy. All right. Let me just get rid of that layer since we're not going to, we'll use the new mask instead of the old mask. Um, what I've done here is put some airplanes crashed in the background because it looks really cool. Um, so I got some planes up in the air which aren't showing up. I don't know why. Oh, okay, they're not on. All right, so I got these planes up in the air, up in this corner here. Those little suckers right there. And we got this one, a couple of clouds of smoke there as well. Bit of bit more fog. All right. So the way that done what I've done here with the plane is I've actually used a model, um, or actually I think it's a toy plane I used, and I just shot it on a white background, cut it out, and obviously just got rid of the nose there, so it looks like it's hitting the ground. Um, all right. So let's have a look. What else we got here? I've also got it on fire because that looks nice and violent. Just nice and freshly crashed. Okay, so let's talk about how to do this smoke. Now the way I've done this is I've actually used a real smoke cloud. And if I just put a solid layer behind it, you can actually see a little bit more what's going on. Okay, so there's my cloud. Now, I think this was a forest fire or something like that where I sampled this smog from. I haven't actually masked out the cloud here because that would have taken ages, and I've got a simpler method. If I put this on to normal, you're going to see something here. You're going to see a really bad selection. Now, what I've done is just basically grab the wand tool or maybe selective color and just sampled very quickly the cloud. And the reason I've done it that way is because I know during this technique I'm about to show you is I don't need to have a lot of detail in the whites. All right. So if I set this to multiply, you're going to notice that anything white disappears like that. Got a little bit of the mask showing down here if you look. Now what we can do to get rid of that mask is get on our levels, Command L, and just by dialing, getting our histogram and pulling it onto, lightening it off a bit, we're affecting the whites. See, the more I do it, you'll see it's actually eating the white away and leaving the black. If I want to increase my blacks, I just go this way, and that will increase my blacks. All right, I'm going to leave that the way I had it. There's a bit of mask showing in here, a bit of the background, but I'm not going to worry about that too much because it's not actually holding on the background. So if I just dump that layer, and there we have it there. All right. So again, multiply makes anything white disappear. So that was a shot on a overcast day. So I had lots of white, so it makes it easy for masking. All right. Drop that on, and if you see I move that away, if I move that anywhere, it's holding pretty good. No matter where you go, it's standing out nice. All right. Let me just go ahead and put that back into place. All right. So now with the other clouds in the background here, what I've done is just duplicated this layer here, shrunk it down in here, and just by either I can use something like I could actually mask that and eat away at it, because what I want to do now is change the shape of this cloud. I don't want it looking like it's been cloned. Okay, so if I oh my god, okay, if I go like this, putting a mask on it, black brush in front, which reveals like that. So you can go do things like that just to change the shape of it slightly. All right. I've got my flow at 100. You might want to change it down to like, I don't know, 20, just to do a bit of a more of a subtle transition from the back. If you don't want to do that, you could also, let me just dump that mask. You could actually go into liquefy, filter, liquefy, and by doing it this way, if I just zoom in on that, doing it this way, go my brush size. I'm up in this icon in the right top left hand corner, the finger pushing something. All right, so if you just go like this and move it around like that, you're going to get a different looking cloud as well, which is kind of an easy fix. Something like that. I'm not going to do it too good because I don't want to bore you guys to death watching me do it. All right, something like that. Okay, and as you can see, before and after, it's different enough. All right, you want might spend a little bit more time on to make it a little bit better than I just did there. All right. Okay, so let's talk about adding some more fog in here. I quite like a bit more depth to this shot here. I think it needs it. So what I'm going to do is add some fog. Now the way I add fog is I go to my background layer, my cloud layer, and I get a marquee and I select on the lightest part of the cloud, which I would say about right in here. Okay, I would feather that sucker about 25 pixels, which should be good, and I would go Command J. All right, so now I have an exact copy of the cloud. So there's my fog copy right here. All right, now I'm going to move that into position, which I want it up into here. All right, let me just find my old one. Okay, there's number one. Okay, so right into here. All right, obviously that's a bit too heavy because it's blocking off our plane. So what we're going to do now is to make it look like it's fog is go into gouache and blur, gouache and blur, and we're going to crank that puppy up to about 40. Let's go to 73.7. Okay, so there's our fog. Obviously still a bit too heavy, and what we're going to do is just knock the fill down to about something like that. Okay, like that. So it's giving a little bit of extra depth to that background. You might even want to drop it down. Okay, this is something you'll have to eyeball and see which way you like the best. I'm going to go with the fill 34%. If you think it's a bit too big, transform it down, Command T, and you can just do it like this. Okay, just adjust it like that. Again, it's just tweaking it to what you feel looks the best. And if I want to add another layer on top of that, another depth or another uh, fog layer to it, I'll just duplicate that, Command J, and I'm going to shrink this one down even further like that. And I might even get that a little bit of a blur, gouache and blur. Not quite, I think this one doesn't have to be quite as heavy. Maybe let's make sure we're doing something that's not too strong. Maybe it's something like 10. Again, it's something just have to eyeball 10. That's all right. 30, yeah. Keep the fill at 34%. That's fine. All right. Okay, let me just go back to my original ones, which I think I like the new ones better. So I'm going to keep the new ones. All right. Let me just get rid of those. All right. The drop shadow on the plane. All right. Let's have a talk about these drop shadows. All right, so I'm looking at this shot here, and I'm looking, if I go up to my final shot here, and I'm going, okay, so we got our sun coming over here. We're going to have a bit of light, obviously in that direction, going to be casting a bit of a shadow. I would not be tempted to do this old technique where you get the airplane transform, and people go like this. They transform it down, and they just start bending stuff in like that, okay? You don't often see a lot of shadows in real life doing this. Okay, you do, but you don't. If you look, especially with this much fog and haze in the air, the shadow would be a little bit more diffused. Okay, this is what I'm thinking. So the way I would do this type of shadow here is I would put a new layer above that, and I would put that to black. I would get a brush, a big, fat, rounded brush, something at about, let's say something 365. If I show you the breakdown, something like that. So 365, and you can see hardness is set to 0, And I'm just adjusting this like this. I'm just going to go to about there. Just I want it very, very flat. All right, let me go back to that. Okay, 365. We're going to give that a go. I'm going to maybe just fatten it up a little bit. All right. What I'm going to do too is the flow I'm going to put fairly low. I'm going to go to about, let's go zero. Let's go 5%. Oops. All right. And all right, something like that. Actually, that's still a bit too fat, I think. I might even go up and I even adjust this down a little bit, even to there, which is probably what it was originally. Okay, got my new layer. Let's zoom in on this a bit. And to do this, again, the flow is very light because I want to build the shadow up. So it's just like this. I'm doing it beside so you can see. Well, actually, I'll do it on top so you can see what's going on. All right. Delete. Oops, sorry. Command delete. All right. So just in like this, and I'm just going to tap this really lightly. And you see, I'm just building it up, and very quickly. Just something like that. I mean, it's very subtle. In the time you put your fog and all that, it's going to be quite diffused. All right, something like that. Um, if I wanted to make it a bit longer, because there would be some, obviously, the plane would be casting a little bit of shadow. I might duplicate that. Command J, transform it. Oh, hold on, I've got the other. I don't need that in there. Let's just get rid of that. Delete. All right, so I've got a duplicate of that, and I might even just transform that down and just changing the shape just slightly. And I'm giving it what I call a second shadow. You often notice when shadows fall, they don't always fall in one solid shape. They have different levels of thickness to them, like a secondary, what I call a secondary shadow. So if I put this secondary shadow, maybe just in here. I mean, it's a very subtle thing, but it does make a little bit of a difference. And if you want to, you could get this original one we've worked on here, and we could get the smudge tool. Now this is something that might take a little few goes back and forth, but if you get the smudge tool, you can actually, oops, what's going on? You can actually go back and forth and bleed that shadow down a little bit. All right, that's a really bad example, but let me just revert it. All right, so let's go. Let's put that fill of this layer down a bit. I've got that at 100. I think it needs to be a bit less, and I think let me just get our secondary shadow. It's over here. That can go in here, and I think the fill on that could be about 50. Let's try. Let's try 64%. That should be fine. Okay, and if you can smudge it down, getting that original drop shadow, you can actually smudge it down, or you can just get another brush and again just building up these shadows really slowly, very small brushes, 5%. I'm putting another layer above it, and I'm just going to bring that down, just like that, trying to get an idea. It's something like that. Again, I could even transform it and maybe even filter, blur. Could even do maybe a motion blur on it a little bit. Get the direction down like that. See if that works. I mean, there's always a few different ways to do these type of things. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on it so you guys don't glaze over and get bored. I'm going to go back to my original one. So that's basically how I've done that, okay? Let me just get rid of the other layers. All right, let's go back up into here. Okay, so really quickly, planes in the air. Nothing spectacular happening here. I've got just they're shot on white, and they're just cloned. Now, being in the same pattern and from the same angle and being that close in the air, I'm not too worried with perspective. I think they would be relatively in the same shape if they're flying in formation. So there are all the planes right here, as you can see. One, two, three. Instead of setting them to overlay each one of them or multiply, I've set the whole folder to multiply. All right. So if I go to normal, you're going to see the white showing through. Remember how I was telling you earlier, anything that's on white, if I set it to multiply, the white disappears and the darker colors stay. All right. So I put that to multiply, my white disappears, and I'm left with a silhouette. I've also, the fill on this layer, this whole folder is about 40% because if I zoom out, if I put that to 100, you're going to see, that's just obviously way too strong. All right. So I think something like, 40 is a good compromise between the two. Okay. And I think we're just going to quickly, if I turn all my layers on, another thing I want to talk about is while we're establishing the mood of this shot here, I want to talk about the the sun glare because with this first tutorial, I'm just telling you about how I'm establishing the mood of the shot. So that's our backgrounds, and now I think this lens flare also comes into that part of the tutorial. The plane, how I do the plane, will be the second part of the tutorial. All right. So my coloring is nothing unusual here. I might just show you very briefly the coloring. All right. So the first layer I do is the hue saturation. Okay. If I double click that, you're going to see I've got my saturation all the way turned down. So basically what this does is desaturate the shot 100%. Now it doesn't look desaturated because what I've done is set it to overlay. If I go back to normal, you're going to notice that it's desaturated. Now it's not totally desaturated because I've got the opacity on 55%. Okay, and I'll tell you why in a second. Okay, so basically we've got an adjustment layer above the whole shot, and we've got it set to overlay. And what overlay does is it gives it a nice little contrasty pop, as you can see. I mean, I quite like this technique. Off and on. And if I put that up, the opacity up to 100, you're going to see that's just a little bit too strong. So I dial that down to 55, and I get a nice balance between the two. All right. Again, for those who don't know, do an adjustment layer down here on the bottom of your layers. That little icon here, click, hold, hue saturation, let it go, and it puts a new one above it. I'm not going to go too much into the color here because this is an individual choice you'll have to make on your own depending on your own shot. You can see here I've just dialed in a little bit of red, a little bit of green, and a bit of blue. All right, nothing scientific to this. I'm just eyeballing it to see what I like. The levels, I think, looking at it here, I think the levels were a bit too flat. The overall drop in the shot was just getting a little bit flat, so I just did levels, and I've just pumped up the right histogram, which increases the contrast. Okay, now let's talk about the sun glare. I'm just going to turn these levels off here, and let's just work on the sun glare. Now obviously if you have the sun setting over here, you're going to have a bit of glow. You're going to have a bit of light bleeding onto the actual plane, onto the ground, and such. All right, so the way I do this, really basic. Get a big ass brush. I'm thinking, oh, let's try about 1500. Okay. Set a new layer. New layer like that. And we're going to set it to screen. Okay. Screen. Going to pick a nice yellow, so let's try a yellow in here. So I'm hitting my option. I've got my paintbrush selected. I'm going to click. Let's try something in the cloud area here. All right, let's try about in here. Maybe I might just get a little bit more orange. Click on that, get that up. It might go a little bit, maybe a little bit more orange. All right, want a nice sunset, nice bright sunset. All right, so my flow, let's go down to about 20% on that. And we're just going to go like this. And now we're bleeding it onto the shot like that. All right. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time because this is something you can play with yourself. All right. And I think what I've done here Um, Let me just click on that one there. Let me go to normal. I just want to see what I've actually done. Yeah, so I think I've gone a little bit more orange there, which is okay. Yep. And I've actually even, if you'll notice down here in the corner, I've even actually probably gone to a bit of a smaller brush and I've dragged into here. And I've just gone, something like that. Just to make it look like like a little bit of flare of lights come down into the camera and hit the wheel. All right, just for a little bit more realism. I'm going to set that to screen and like that. Okay, pretty easy. And I've got a second pop up here, and this is very subtle. You may not pick it up on your screen here, but this is just adding a little bit more orange into this area, into this area here. If I take it off, I don't know if you're picking that up, but it's just a little bit brighter. Let me go to normal. Oh, it's very subtle. And I've also said to overlay. So overlay is just increasing the color saturation just a little bit, just give it a bit more of a glow to it. Okay, so that's basically how I've done that. And I've done this in the top layer. Everything else is below it. You'll notice the planes below it, the clouds background. This is really, really near the top of the stack of layers. Only thing I've got is a bit of color above it, which I'll just run through really quickly now. Okay, there we have a desaturated a bit. Okay. Again, this is no science to this. This is just me eyeballing the shot going too much, too little, need more, need less. All right. Up here we got levels, so I'm just popping it, very subtle. Again, color balance. A bit more red, a little bit of green, a bit of blue. The top one here, I'm not going to, this is just a sharpen. I've flattened the whole, all the shots together. I've gone Command Shift E, which copies everything below it, and I've set this to overlay and filter other high pass. Okay, and seeing it in here, if I go into there, if I eyeball this around here, I'm just going, yeah, I'm going 1.4 looks all right to me, I guess. That's fine. And if I turn it off, you're just going to see that it's giving her a nice little pop as well as the plane. Anything contrasty really gets picked up nicely. Okay, let's get rid of that. And you said to overlay, put the original back. Again, hue saturation, just pushed up the saturation bit plus, so I'm just oversaturating it a bit. Selective color, I'm just putting a little bit of yellow into the whites. All right, let me just click on that and I can show you. So you're not going to notice anything in here until I go to my whites. So with selective color, when I want to put just affect one color, I go into the color I want to affect, pull that down, and I'm going just whites, and I'm saying I want yellow into my highlights. So if I take that down up around the planes here, you're going to notice that it's gone back to more of a neutral color. See, yellow, neutral. Plus 70 gives you more yellow, normal, just white. Okay, that easy. Again, that's just a personal thing. Selective color, I don't know what I've done here because I could look through all these, but this would be just a little tweaking thing. I'm probably taking a bit of magenta out or something like that. I noticed with these YouTube videos that there's a bit of a color cast on these, which I'm not sure why. I'm not a film guy, that's why I take pictures. So somebody out there might have a reasoning why that is the case. I don't know. All right. Okay, so that's all I'm going to talk about today. I want to keep this tutorial fairly short, and the next part I'll be talking about is how you make this bad boy look all beat up. Okay, thanks for watching.